expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Welcome to Moments of Strength. I'm your host, Mary Kaufman. In this show, we dive deep into the lives of mothers' unique journeys of parenting and personal growth. From juggling family dynamics to personal passions and career ambitions, we'll talk about challenges, triumphs, and pivotal moments that shape their lives, emphasizing the resilience and strength that comes with motherhood. Today's guest is Debi. Welcome, Debi. And actually, this is a special episode because Debi is my husband's aunt, and so I've known her a long time, and she's seen me go through a lot of things, and I have been witness to things that she has also gone through. So I'm excited that she was brave enough to come on here and chat with me. So thank you for coming, Debi.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
I'm so happy you're here. So we actually we've had a lot of conversations, I think, over the years, but never one where, I was thinking about this on the way here, where it's sort of peers because you're a mom and I'm a mom. Right. So a lot of times it's aunt, niece, or in-law or something like that. But right. It's kind of exciting to have our own space where we're not interrupted and can just chat as moms.
It is. So, yep, I agree.
So this is good. Okay, so the format of the show really is I'll have you introduce yourself. So we have some background, some backstory, so that when you talk about your personal pursuits or experiences in motherhood and even grandmotherhood now, there's some backstory to understand that path. So I'll have you introduce yourself, and then we'll talk just about your life and those kind of topics. And then before we end, I'll give you the chance to offer any kind of insight or value you think you might have for other moms. Okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about you, starting anywhere. Some people start from when they were very young. Some people skip all that and start from, some important moment in their life, whatever you are comfortable with.
Well, my name is Debi Herbers. Obviously, you know that. Mm-hmm. But I had a very interesting childhood, and I think as a mom and as a grandma, a lot of that shapes how you raise your own children and how you were raised. But sometimes there's those little barriers that you want to try to break so that history doesn't repeat itself.
Yes,
so my husband and I have been married 46 years.
Okay.
And I'm only 49, so I don't know how that happened.
That is so strange.
Anyway, we have one child. Tim, he'll be 40 next year, which sounds crazy to me that he's 40, but he's adopted. We weren't able to have our own children, and we adopted him as an infant. Okay. And so motherhood was we kind of fell into it easily. My husband's from a family of 9.
Oh, wow.
I'm from a family of 5, so we had lots of experience, kind of, sort of. A lot of mentors, people who we watched. My sisters, I had 3 sisters who I was close to. I'm the baby of my family. And so they were kind of the role models for me. But yeah, it was interesting. Tim's ADHD, hated school, struggled. And I learned that I had to mentor. When he was diagnosed, he was 5.
Okay.
And we were anti-medication at first until I had a conversation with Steve's aunt. And she's like, Debi, if Tim couldn't walk, would you not want him to use crutches? I'm like, of course I would. She goes, well, it's the same difference when you have a child who's not fitting in or who's different, that you can't seem to steer them in the right direction. Sometimes medication's just the same as crutches or leg braces or glasses, or when you have to try to get them to focus or dial in on something. So we went that route, and it definitely helped.
And that was, if he was 5, so that was 35 years ago, and that was, ADHD was not well known for many years by then.
So I dived into to research it, joined a local CHAD group, which is Children and Adults with Attention Deficit Disorder. It's kind of a national organization. And then we did counseling, and I mean, it was a journey all through. And he struggled with being adopted. It was not easy for him. He felt like, he kind of knew a little bit of his backstory, but it bothered him. So he never really asked about his parents. I mean, random questions here and there.
Sure.
But it was interesting. It was an interesting journey, and I messed up a lot, but we also succeeded a lot. Yeah. So you learn by your mistakes. Now you get to be a grandma. The whole game changes.
Right.
So Tim has one daughter, and when she was about a year old, he and his wife split up and got divorced. And that was really, Tim has struggled with depression and anxiety, and so he came back home with a baby.
Right.
So and then they were with us until she was about 5. So we're very close to her, and she's always been really a joy. So much more relaxed being a grandparent than it is a parent. You don't have the same struggles.
No, and you have the experience, and you can have some foresight, and you raised their parent to some degree.
Yep, exactly.
So, and thanks to Tim for sharing his story on the show too. I'm sure
he's good about it.
I know Tim, so I'm sure he doesn't mind. But also, just going back to that adoption piece, when you knew you couldn't have kids, and then just that road. Can you talk a little bit about what that road was like?
Sure. Infertility was terrible. You live your life in 30-day cycles, really.
Right.
And so for myself personally, nothing ever worked right in my system. And so I did have 2 tubal pregnancies.
Okay.
The first one, they had to remove the tube and the ovary, and the second one, they just tried to remove and clean it up, knowing that we wanted to have children. So Tim didn't come into our life until we'd been married 7 years.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So that was quite a shock from doing whatever we wanted. But I had a really good doctor, and I had some reconstructive surgeries, and we tried several different things, including fertility drugs. But nothing ever seemed to work. So it's my feeling, which always has been, everything happens for a reason. So it was okay. Our doctor encouraged us to look into adoption, and we went through that. That process is very daunting. It's like you have to give them your whole life story from a child, and how you want your child to feel about money, and how you want your child to their education and their continuing education. It's like some of that stuff, I didn't go to college. Okay. Neither did my husband. So that was kind of foreign to us, but important none the least. So, but with the whole fertility thing, it was kind of, I ended up having a total hysterectomy at age 28.
Oh my goodness.
So I was very young. But on the other hand, it was a relief. I never had to think about it again.
Right.
So
take another path.
Yeah, and from a health standpoint, it was the best thing for me. But Tim was about 2 when that happened. So when we were supposed to get him, when he was born, we got a call, and they said, we have a baby. Mom has had no prenatal, and she wants to give the child up. So the day we were to bring him home, she changed her mind.
Oh.
So it was like a death. It was terrible.
Yes.
So, but the whole journey was really very interesting, and I've thought about that many times. Then 2 months later, approximately, the attorney called and said, Mom can't do it. Her and the dad are apart. She doesn't, and she already had a 2-year-old.
Oh, okay.
So she was very familiar with what being a mom was, but there were a lot of mitigating factors. So between adoption and all the medical stuff that we were going through, it was just kind of a hectic time, but everything works out the way it's supposed to.
So, you know, I talk a lot about mental strength and mental toughness, and just going through something like that, everybody doesn't have somewhere they go inside, you know, or they're working to develop that, or they just feel overwhelmed or they can't do it, you know, especially in motherhood. It's like you are tasked with so many things. You can't foresee that until you are responsible for another person's life. And so, you know, is there somewhere you went or something you thought, you know, everybody that I've asked that question to has a little bit different answer, but, you know, when you look back, was there something that you went back to that could pull you through that, or?
Well, at the time, and continuing today, we had very close friends. We were the only 2 couples that didn't have children, and they were going through very similar.
Okay.
And so we were kind of that sounding board for each other. But it's different because if someone in her family got pregnant, it upset her. Where I was thrilled.
Right.
You know, so it was very emotionally, it was overwhelming, but yet, you know, it's like you don't quit trying. So it was just kind of like, okay, this isn't going to be, we'll have, go through another 30-day cycle. But that was the hardest part for me, really. And my sisters were encouraging, and I had a lot of support. So that kind of took some of the pressure. And both Steve and I felt very differently about it. Where I would be upset, he was kind of emotionless.
Sure.
Which, typical man, you know, don't want to show everybody all your cards at once. So.
Well, or maybe he didn't want to upset you more too, and you know.
Yep,
that's a scary time. You don't really know what you're supposed to do, regardless of what you're feeling.
There's no right or I don't think there's any right words, but I cannot tell you how many people said to us after we adopted Tim, "You're going to get pregnant." I'm like, if one more person says that to me, I might have to go to drastic measures.
It's so hard. And again, you know, I think people are well-intentioned, but you know, just to say something off the cuff like that, it's like you don't know what somebody's whole struggle has been to get there, and again, it's well-intentioned, but not always thought through, maybe, or something like that.
Well, and then Tim's school journey was a whole nother. That's what led me to the Chad group and to get information and really learn to advocate for him, because the system isn't, our school system isn't designed for kids that have attention issues. It's disruptive to a class. I understand that, but there were different things, and I ran into some really big roadblocks. I mean, I tried to work through Tim's counselor to help make changes at school and to get him in a 504 plan, to get him some extra resources, but Tim himself bucked that.
Oh,
he didn't want anything to do with it. He didn't want any kind of a label. He didn't want extra help. He didn't want any of that stuff. So he really did struggle, but he loves to read. Thank goodness.
Oh, saving.
Thank goodness.
Yes.
He read all the time. He'd recite facts to Steve and I, and we'd be looking at each other like, how does he know that?
Yeah.
I mean,
his daughter's like that too.
She's
so smart. Yeah.
She loves to read, just like Tim.
And she loves to share what she's learned.
Yeah.
Which is so fun.
Yeah. So we have a good time with it, but school can be probably the biggest challenge that I see parents having. And it was, I mean, I could teach other women how to mentor for their kids, because that's the hardest part when you know they need, for example, Tim, if a teacher used an overhead, I could not figure out why he wasn't taking tests. And I went to the teacher, and he was failing the class because he wasn't taking any tests. She'd put the overhead on and shut the lights off. Well, he'd put his head down and go right to sleep.
Good night.
So I'm like, can I buy, I offered to buy different bulbs for the overhead where you wouldn't have to shut the lights off, or you could dim them. She wouldn't have anything to do with it. She's like, I'm not making an accommodation for one kid. I said, he can't be the only kid in this class that puts his head down when you turn the lights off.
Right. I for sure did that sometimes, so he definitely wasn't the only one.
Exactly. I knew he wasn't the only one. But that was high school, and that was a lot harder. And he went through a lot of phases. But as a parent, I had to keep reminding my husband, his friends were a little bit on the strange side. And I'm like, we want him here, Steve. I'd rather have him here in this house where we can oversee what's going on than
have his
him
friends
leaving.
come over instead of him. Okay, him go somewhere else.
Steve wasn't real excited about that. He wasn't very excited about that, but he got on board. So.
I love that too. I love when my kids have their friends over.
Yeah.
Well, and then you get, some insight into like their lives and what they're thinking and saying, what they're up to. And but circling back to the school thing, again, that was, some decades ago. And I think, the school system started out as one thing, and then it's sort of trying to adjust this entire system, which is so difficult to do. And we've learned so much about the differences in people and the way they learn. And then trying to do this massive overhaul while still carrying out the process. It's, that is, talk about daunting. But what we can do, without trying to overhaul the whole system ourselves, are things like how you offered to change the bulb. I think it's, as the parent advocating for your child, understanding what you're up against and trying to just make moves where you can within that system that is out of your control, but then investing in your child and being interested in them when they're in your care, so when they're not in school. And it doesn't mean it's easy. That's definitely horrifically difficult, because you're trying to do something here and then you send them, and that system is having challenges, and there's all kinds of personalities and people involved in that again you can't control. You can maybe impact, you can volunteer, you can offer to help, and but then your child comes home and it's really your responsibility as their parent to debrief with them. Well, what are you experiencing? I think a lot of times, kids come home and they go, school's good. So exactly. And to as a parent, you're like, whew, like school is good. They're not coming home crying. They're not coming home like beat up or something like that. One thing that we did when the kids were little was, because they would come home and I would say, like, how was school? And they'd say good, and I'd say, well, tell me about it. But I learned over time they don't know where to start. And when they're very little, kids don't understand that you, another person, have a different perspective, that you did other things during the day that you don't know. They assume you saw what they saw. They can't verbalize that. When I learned that, I was like, oh my gosh, like, you have to get specific. So we used to do this, I have multiple kids, so they'd be at the table and we'd play this game at dinner where they could ask each other a question about their school day, but it had to be specific. So they would say, like, tell me what you did in gym. And then the other kid would say what they did in gym, and then they would say, so what did you do in math? And you learn about your kids, because some kids will say what the project was, but other kids will describe the kids that were around them. And other kids will focus right away on what the teacher's doing. And that really helped me learn, what was going on with them. And just back to the point, it's really our job as parents to dig in and understand what they're going through during the day, because we don't have any, we're not there.
And for Tim, school was not a happy place. So when he got home after school, he was, it took a while for me to figure out if he doesn't get his work done in school, I'm not fighting with him over it all night long. He hated math, hated it. Now, as a father, his daughter's bringing home math, but Steve and I...
The nightmare never ends
The
for
nightmare
him.
doesn't end, right? So he's like Googling stuff on his phone, how to do
Thank goodness.
with squares and all this stuff. So it's been kind of funny to watch because now, as an adult, he'll say, Ella, I didn't do well at this, but I want you to do well at it. I want you to do better than I did. So it seems to be coming a full circle, which is, as a parent, it's fun to watch your own kids
Of course,
parent.
Yeah.
So, but we have Ella almost every single day. Steve and I do.
Okay.
Tim works 10 in the morning till 7 at night.
Okay.
So
That's long.
when Ella gets on, we meet her at her bus stop, which is right by their house. We pick her up from school. We take her to our house. We feed her dinner. Steve helps her with her homework. So we're seeing it from a different perspective. She changed schools this year from public to private. Huge difference right off the bat. So it taught me a lot more about this public school system that I hadn't really thought about, but the communication was not there.
Sure.
And so now it's there, and it's an adjustment for her. She doesn't like wearing a uniform, but I like it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so much easier.
It is so much easier.
You don't have the struggles of like keeping up and.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's been fun. I was kind of thrust into the mom role when they first came to live with us because her mother works at a nursing home, and so if there was someone with some, and Ella was premature too, so
Right, I
add that
remember
to
that.
it. We didn't want her to have daycare because she was just...
She was very premature. I
yeah,
remember
she was
that
born
long.
at 25 weeks, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, she was a little bitty. She weighed a pound, 1 pound, 8 ounces.
She was so
something like that.
small.
Yeah, she was teeny tiny. So
And if you met her today, she is so strong and smart, and
you'd never know.
you would never,
Never
and not
guess.
that we know, not that you could tell, you know,
Right.
or something, but just, I mean, she was fighting from the day she
Yep,
came in, and she is just kind of a little force.
yep.
So.
She is still that. Yep, she definitely is. So we spent. That's another education you don't sign up for, but
No.
you get in a hurry. Is the NICU at University of Iowa, Steed Children's Hospital. She spent 88 days there.
It's a long
She
time.
came home on the 88th day, and it's funny because when she was born, I said to the nurse, "How long do you think she'll be in the NICU?" She said, "We're gonna care for her, just like she were still in the womb. She'll
Gotcha.
develop and will help with certain things, but she'll go home close to her due date." And she came home about 10 days. She was born February 4th, but she was due May 15th.
Okay.
So
So she came home close to that.
she came home close to that. I think she
amazing.
came home like May 5th or 6th, something like that. So, but yeah, that was a long haul and a huge learning curve. So,
Well, and an adjustment for you to go back to sort of like a primary parent care, at least for a while.
right.
You know, trying
Because
to help
Tim
out.
and Amanda both had to go back to work, and Amanda was in the hospital for 10 days before Ella was born. She was put on bed rest, but she went into labor. Then they stopped it. The second time she went into labor, they couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
So, but she had amazing doctors and nurses and caregivers. So
Yeah.
that was interesting. But yeah, she is a little force today. That's for
is.
sure.
Yeah.
She knows what she wants, and
She does.
like most kids, their emotions are all over the place, and you're going to know if she doesn't like something you said.
Yeah. Yeah. Some kids are just so open about that. And, you know, she has a lot of confidence.
Right.
You know, is she 10 now?
She'll be 10 in February.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, at 10, she'll just come in and have a conversation with adults as though she is,
Yep.
you know, on this peer level, and it's respectful and everything, but she is not afraid to be who she is, which is great.
She, like Tim, struggled with being an only. It's kind of like, she kind of struggles with that too, because she wants somebody to play with.
Oh, she's very social.
And our neighborhood, we didn't have any kids, but now we do. So she loves to be with us. So she spends the night more times than not, but not through the school weeks.
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about, so you know college, you already mentioned that. So out of high school into the workforce, or how did that go?
Out of high school. Well, I actually married right out of high school.
Okay.
And that didn't work out so well. So we were married not quite 2 years.
Okay.
And then my sister introduced me to Steve, who I'm still married to. But I went right from high school. I graduated in May, got married in August.
Okay.
And then went to work. I worked 25 years in food service with John Deere.
Okay.
I didn't work for Deere. I was a contractor.
Oh, okay.
They contract their food services out. So I filled vending machines. I worked in a cafeteria. I was all over the place. So I've always liked food, and my mom actually got me that job because she worked for the same company at Alcoa.
I didn't know this, so this is fun.
Yeah.
This always happens with somebody I know. Even I've known you for so long, and then these stories come up, and I'm like, how did I not learn that over the years?
How did I not hear that?
Yeah.
So she actually got me the job, and I ended up staying 25 years. I worked in the plant for a while, filling vending machines, carrying heavy stuff. That at one time they had 5,000 employees at the branch that I worked at for John Deere, where they made corn harvesters. So, it was pretty interesting. They offered me a position into management, and so I stepped into that. Different company came in, and that happens a lot of times in corporate food service. Different companies will bid on the services, so they may change, and then you have to reapply with the new company. And so anyway, food service was always, I loved to cook. My mom loved to cook. I had an easy bake oven when I was little. I used to make my dad little cakes and leave them on the table for him.
Oh, that's sweet.
So it's always been something that I've thoroughly enjoyed doing. Most people are like, ugh.
I know, me.
Yeah. But I like it. I like to kind of plan. I do a lot of stuff. I used to plan weekly menus.
Yes.
But now that I'm the age I am, and it's Steve and I and Tim, I mean Ella, most of the time. So.
And she even does some cooking.
This year she started wanting to cook. So.
That's good.
She's cooked things that I wouldn't cook, like hamburger helper.
Yeah. But that's a good intro to how things work.
Her dad loves it, so he made it for them once, so she wanted to try to make it. But she's very specific with who she'll let help her. And her papa is not one of them.
No, she's excused.
So he can only observe, so it's fun. So she's starting to make a few things. I think Tim has that passion. He likes to cook, and that's what his current job is. He works at an assisted living facility, and he's a chef for them. So
his energy is a good fit for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's good.
And he's creative, sometimes a little too creative in the food department. You can't just put any spice you want to in something and think it's going to...
Maybe you just do that once.
Yeah.
Don't repeat.
Definitely do it once. So, but no, it's kind of fun. So I spent 25 years in food service, and then a sister-in-law on my husband's side encouraged me she was working for Aflac Insurance, and she said, it's a way to kind of have your own business. I always wanted my husband I wanted to open an electrical business. He's an electrician.
Okay.
So my goal was, you can be the muscle and I'll run the other side of it, the office, and learn how to bid jobs and do all that stuff. It was never his dream, and it took me a long time to figure that out. So once I figured it out, I'm like, well, now I'm going to have to
I'll do
create
this without
a career
you being
for
the
myself.
electrician.
So he just didn't want the pressure of being a business owner. So
It's not for everyone.
I interviewed, and I've been working with Aflac for 24 years. So I went from food service to selling insurance. Never in a million years did I think I would do that.
No.
But I love it. It's a great company, and they are very community oriented. They're still a family-owned business.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep, they're still a family-run business. So it's kind of nice to see some of the things they do. They have a children's cancer center, and we, as agents, we can have statement deductions to go to the children's cancer center, and there's always an ambassador at all of our meetings to talk about and show movies and new things that they're doing. So it's kind of I love it. I'm a people person.
You know, there's a lot of things, I mean, I can see this for you. So, and we didn't talk a lot about, you know, from like 0 to 18, but just in talking about, you know, Tim and Ella and what you did for when you contracted with John Deere, and this, I can see you doing this, you know, it's moving around, it's engaging with people, a variety of people. There's some adventure involved in that because you don't always know what the day will bring, even if your job is fill vending machines, even if your tasks are the same. It doesn't matter because the paths you cross and the people who you come in contact with will be different, and that was probably the same for you at John Deere. And then in Aflac, I mean, in selling insurance or working with people in their insurance, it's never the same. You know, what people are going through is never the same. Some people move through that and they have another ailment, or they just need another policy, or but you're also moving
really
around always.
For me, it's always about educating people. I mean, it's not as important to me to sell, say, a cancer plan or some other line of business that we offer. It's more important for me to educate people why they might need it. It's not for everybody.
No,
and
you're
I
very good at that
understand
too. Like even because I've, you know, just, I mean, you've stayed at our house a couple days, so I can see kind of like, you know, how you approach things, and you have this just approach where it's really the best interest of the other person. It seems when you interact with somebody, and I think, you know, in your lines of work and just in your parenting, that has come across. You're not here for me to analyze you, by the way, but it's just something like.
Well, please feel free. I'm always open.
But I'm just saying, you know, like to observe that, and then and to also, you know, to have been folded into the family and watch you navigate, you know, family interactions, or even just be privy to. Well, other people saying what you did, to be honest, you know, at the salon or whatever it is, to learn, you know, what your place has been. And I know you have had siblings, and age is important, but age doesn't always determine the matriarch, you know, or something like that. So I think there have been many times where you've sort of, also, I'm not going to come to Christmas because your sister's like, what? But, you know, there have been times when, you know, you've just been the person who's going to organize it, who makes the decision, things like that.
And it's kind of funny because it was my mom, it was so important to her to keep the family together. She could care less if anybody else came in. She just wanted her kids and her grandkids. And I don't know how many times she said to me, you're going to have to keep them together, Debbie. My other 3 sisters moved a couple hours away from Mom and I. But as a teenager, there's 6 years between myself, my brother and sister ahead of me are twins. There's 6 years between us. So I had the benefit of being home. Me and my mom were home alone. My dad was a truck driver. So it was, we were always really close. More, I always would say she was really one of my friends. She had to be a mom, but I was the youngest, so she wasn't all stressed out about if I stayed out a half hour too long, or, you know, I
She's like, I worked with the other ones.
I didn't have a lot of rules. I really didn't, and it irritated the other ones because they had a lot of rules.
Sure.
But yeah, it was interesting. My parents, I loved them dearly. Very, very different individuals. My dad was an alcoholic, so that was stressful growing up with. But you learn to navigate through it, how to go around it, how to be there for everybody else. So it was stressful, but I made it.
You did. Well,
And-
there's a lot of resilience there,
Yeah.
you know.
A lot of things to overcome, but also I think the struggles in our life teach us the most.
Well, you
It's-
can't escape struggle. That's the
You
thing.
can't.
And most of it is struggle when you really think about it. It's really struggle with, you know, bits of happiness, bits of success. And
Right.
even if you're going to accomplish a goal, everything on the way to that goal is the struggle. So,
Right.
and then you accomplish it and it's a blip, you know. Now you did that. Well, now you have another goal, or you make it through something that was imposed on you. You know, as children, we don't ask for those things. You don't ask for the family you're born
and
into.
it's kind of like, you know, Mom was so important to her to keep the family together, so we grew too big to have Christmas at somebody's house, so we ended up going to a motel where the kids could swim and the adults could have cocktails if they wanted to, and nobody had to drive or go anywhere. And I ended up being the person to organize all that because my sisters were away. And the only person in town was my brother, which, I mean, I was thankful that he was in town with us after my dad died. I thought my mom would be, you know, free and be able to travel and do things because she cared for him for so many years.
Right.
But she didn't. She just wanted her family. That's all she really cared about. So I ended up, because they all lived away, planning the birthday parties, planning the holidays, making sure everybody was there. And it just kind of morphed into I was in charge of the family.
Yeah. Well, you're
So-
doing like the same thing you do with like
Right.
Aflac. You know what I mean? It's like best interest of everybody. How do we organize this? Who
Right.
do I farm this out to? Who will help? You know, what supplies do we need? I remember when we had the baby shower and you and your sisters came in, and we were in like a church basement,
Yep.
and everyone was there, and the four of you came in and like unrolled this whole buffet. It was already ready, and I just was like, what is going on? But you know, you were there, and it was very organized. And I think those skills too, you know, the rest of your family, the next level, the next generation, the cousins, they all have seen that happen. They watched how you all did that. You know, so that's great example for keeping the family together. Everybody is in on that. Everybody has lived that because of your efforts and your mom's efforts, and you know, ready to sort of, no one really wanted you to give up that role, and they still harass you about
I
that
wanted
a little
to
bit.
give
Yeah,
up
but
the
you were
role.
like, no.
I'm like,
It's
Brian,
enough.
some of the, well, there's 11 grandchildren. My son's number 11. He's the youngest.
Okay, yes.
So it kind of became funny because when Chris, my oldest niece, was born, I was only 6 years old. No.
Oh, so
I was
close.
7 years old. So I was closer in age to all the kids.
Yeah, it's almost like siblings.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's been fun. It's really been enjoyed watching them grow into their own lives and get married and have children and go through all those phases. But I always come back to the same core that my mom instilled in all of us was you've only got your family. They're always going to be there. And that's very true. No matter how you were raised, whether it was dysfunctional or you were Ozzie and Harriet, whatever. So, but yeah, it's been fun to organize, but it's been equally as fun to hand it off to some of the kids.
Well, you get to a point where you're like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, but I also trust that
You'll do it.
Somebody will, not me, but somebody will take that over, and it's time. I mean, that's just what happens sort of naturally. Pass that along.
It does. So, but it's fun when, I know I've done my job, and I did a lot of catering, and so I was used to organizing stuff like that, especially food.
Sure.
So I had a birthday party for my husband one time when he turned 60, and we were at a bar, and I asked him to set up a taco bar. So one of my great nephews came to me and he said, Aunt Debbie, they have that all set up backwards. He's like, nothing's in the right. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've created little monsters, because they know it's not set up right.
Too,
and they know they need to come to me to set it up correctly. It's funny.
Even when we went camping,
again,
I was like, what is happening? Like, just unrolled. Suddenly there were tables and a full, you mentioned tacos, like full crock pots, like the whole, and I didn't grow up camping. So I'm like, is this a possibility? Like, this is so crazy. And everyone just sort of came out from everywhere, and we just had this massive get together.
So-and-so brings cheese, so-and-so makes
and they sort of know it's
tomatoes,
this beautiful cadence of, this is what I'm bringing. We've done this so many times. And
so it is fun. And I think to come together with your family over food. Well, for my family, my dad used to always say, if you want my kids to shut up, you need to feed them.
Oh, yes.
That's the only time they're quiet. Put food in front of them. So kind of funny. My parents were both born and raised on a farm.
Oh, okay.
So then you had that kind of background, and I think that's where really the family being instilled into you was just natural. So
well, if you have a farm, everybody runs the farm. Everybody's a critical part of that process.
And what's also funny to me that I've thought about several times, my mom, my oldest sister got divorced, and my mom still bought her husband a Christmas gift. And everybody's like, why are you buying him a gift? And she goes, he's the father of my grandchildren. He's always welcome in this house. He didn't divorce me. So she kind of instilled that too. So all of us, my dad said his biggest accomplishment was all 5 of his kids graduated from high school. But how does a man have 4 daughters and 7 son-in-laws?
And everybody's welcome to all the gatherings,
and
all
they
the
come.
time. Then they come with, whatever their path was after divorce or separation, something like that. Whatever their path was, maybe they got remarried, had more children, whatever. Everyone is welcome.
Everyone's welcome.
Always.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's been and I really credit my mom for that. She paved that way.
Yeah, she set that example.
She did.
Which is so important, and it doesn't mean that there isn't strife and hardship in
people look at us like we're
up,
weird. They're like, what? Everybody's exes
everybody
come to
gets
Christmas?
Along. Yeah, they come to Christmas, and they get along.
They share children. So if you can put your differences aside when you're in that situation, it doesn't happen overnight. You have to get over the hurt and the anger and all those initial feelings. But then you realize, look what it does for your kids.
And that's where
certainly
the focus
the best.
should be. Best interest of the kids. I think, that's really hard, I think, for people too, especially in those first, whatever it is, days, months, years, whatever it is. And I think, it really comes down to you don't even have to like that person.
Right.
But, there should be enough respect there that you're showing your children, And of course, there are always extenuating circumstances where that would not be possible.
Right.
But in general, the kids didn't ask to be part of that. So
that's right. And again, I always felt that there was a reason why I didn't have my own children. But it was a different calling. And I still feel like, I'm involved in our church, and I try to do things in the community and give back somewhat, because we've been so blessed in so many ways So I think my faith is really important to me, and I think it helps carry through in parenting and grandparenting and all my interconnections with my nieces and nephews. Those have always been important relationships to me. So
in, the show really, like I said, is based on, giving resources to mothers. And also, I like to talk about just personal growth. So we have all this responsibility as parents, and that comes first when you're a parent. And I think it's very easy as a mom to sacrifice everything for the good of your kids, and that can be noble. And really, in those first 5 years, that really is what you're doing, because so much of that development is so important and sets the stage for them. It's still important as they get older. But I think moms, a lot of times, look, that's exhausting. And that's your purpose, and that could be your purpose forever. But oftentimes we feel like that is my purpose, and I want that to be successful. And I also have this thing inside me where I want to do or have something that's mine, that I'm still an individual person, though I'm a parent. And that's hard to find, I think, sometimes when you're coming out of that.
I agree.
But it's important because, a more developed and more confident and more, and a happier, you is good for your kids, and it's good to see that that's possible too. Did you experience any of that, or do you have any insight to that?
Of course I did. And I think people who say, oh, I can't wait for my kids to grow up. Well, let me tell you, it's because you don't have a teenager. That's why you're saying that. But wait till you do. It becomes more challenging as a parent, and I think it's important in every relationship, whether it's with your child or whether it's with your spouse or significant other, you have to have your own interests. You have to have your own outlets. It's okay to go out with girls and have dinner or go to a movie. The guys do that differently in sports and other things. Golf, my husband likes to golf, so but I really think it's important mentally. And the fact that we had Tim in counseling for so many years, I think people who go to counseling are smart because they realize there's something there that they can't quite maneuver. And it takes a lot of courage, but I think it's the best thing people can do for themselves. I learned so much about Tim. One time, he said to the he said to the doctor, oh, she always threatens me, but she never follows through with it. And I'm like,
in front of you, he said this?
Yes. And I'm like, name something. He said, well, you always tell me you're going to knock my head off.
It's still there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I threatened.
Thanks for the call out.
So, but, I think for most families, because we're all raised so differently, no two people are raised the same. My husband had 7 sisters, and he knew nothing about girls.
Yeah.
He should know everything in the world about
definitely
girls.
Should.
Nothing. He was clueless. So, my family, my dad, if I had a friend spending the night, it wasn't uncommon to come down. We had a split level house, to come downstairs in the morning and my dad's sitting reading the paper in his underwear. He's like, well, they're underwear. I'm not naked.
Right.
You know? So it's like Steve never saw his dad in his underwear. He didn't know whether he wore boxers or briefs. He was raised very strict Catholic.
Yes.
We were Lutheran, but my dad only went to church if somebody got married or buried.
Oh, okay. Well,
those were the only 2 times. So, I think our world has evolved nicely when it comes to parents being involved in their kids' lives. But I really think a lot of the struggles can really be resolved if people would just seek professional advice. I always said advice is worth what you pay for it. If I'm giving you advice and you're not paying me, it's really not worth anything. It's an opinion.
Right.
It's not advice, it's an opinion.
Well, and, you know, counseling is a way to, it's really a mirror for yourself. You know, it's really a way to explore yourself. And so that person across from you is helping you guide yourself on a path of discovery. So yeah, I also believe in that. And I think that that's important, you know, for the people that works out for.
Especially if you're struggling, don't. You've got to find a way to release it and let yourself off the hook. Because you're not going to do everything exactly right. You're going to make mistakes. I can't tell you how many times I've apologized to Tim. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did that to you. But the famous last lines, and if you ask him, he'll tell you. I always said, you didn't come with an instruction manual.
Yeah, it's so true.
Today, this is my decision, and we're going to do it this way. When you get married, please feel free to change.
Yeah.
But I don't have anything to follow, so it's whatever my instincts are that's going to happen. And sometimes they're not very good.
Right. Sorry
because
about
I'm
that.
mad.
Yeah. Because I'm emotional right now, and you're going to pay for that.
Tim's psychologist said to me one time, when you're really mad at him, Debbie, whisper. Don't yell. Whisper, so he has to lean in to hear what you're saying and control your voice. That worked really, really well.
That is a super valuable thing to share.
It really did work because it kind of diffuses the whole.
Well, it diffuses you.
Yeah.
Because you want to yell.
Yeah.
And you can't. So you're restraining yourself even if you didn't want to.
Yeah.
And then he probably really doesn't want to know what you're saying, but because you're whispering, it's like that beckoning,
what?
You know?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of throws the other person off.
Yeah.
So
this is great.
I did that quite a few times, but then I also yelled quite a few times, which really helps no one.
No. I saw this, it was a drawing or something of what your child sees when you yell. You know, even like a child who's like 2, 3, very young.
Right.
Actually, they probably all see it when you're the parent and you're the person in charge. But it just was a depiction of this child standing there, and the parent was sort of monstrously exaggerated, you know, big teeth. It sort of looked monster-esque. And I saw that, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's terrible. You know, I don't want to come across like that to my children. But you're sort of stumbling through this, you know, and a lot of times as a parent, when you're yelling, it's because you feel out of control.
Exactly.
Guess what? You are. That little person, small but mighty, is their own person. And realizing that as a parent is difficult, because if you acknowledge that, then they become an individual who gets to make decisions at some point about themselves. That's hard to realize as a parent, because aren't you tasked with making sure they're safe? Well, if they have the ability to make their own decisions, now you don't have that
and that's
anymore.
one of the areas where I struggled, that I wish that I could backpedal.
Same.
And do a little bit differently. I mean, shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Of course.
We've all been in that position, but
now you can do it with Ella.
But now I can do it with Ella, that's right. Yeah, I'm in a much easier position. I have a good relationship with her mother, but her mother doesn't drive, so that leaves a lot of the responsibility. She's never taken her to a doctor's appointment or to the dentist or an eye appointment, ever.
Right.
And she's 9 years old, almost 10. So that puts a little bit of Steve and I feel that.
Sure.
Because of Tim's work hours. He really can't take her anywhere during the school year. I mean, he can do early morning appointments when she's out of school.
Right.
But that's kind of a limited amount of time too. So Steve and I have kind of filled that role. And we've also dropped her off and picked her up for every visitation. So,
well, she's very fortunate, you know.
She
and
is.
so is Tim. And even to your point about coulda, woulda, shoulda, now you can do those things with Ella, but you're also demonstrating to Tim, even if he is 40, he can still learn from you about parenting her even if he knows you didn't used to be like that when he was little,
Right.
you know, that shows
He's never
growth.
said that to me, which, I mean, I had thought about that a few times, but he really has never paralleled a conversation about how he was right. Oh, he has said, oh, sure, she can have whatever she wants. I said, I told you before she was born, once Amanda gives birth, you're out.
Yeah, you've been replaced.
You're down here on the totem pole. So,
yeah.
but yeah, life throws us many, many curveballs, and it's been a pleasure, really. I've had a very up and down, up and down, up and down life as challenges hit you. Your kids are younger, and then when you get older, you're thrust into a role of caring for your parents. And
that's a whole new set.
It is.
Parents and older siblings.
Yeah.
You know, things like that.
Yep. And I'm telling you, parents are hard to raise.
Yeah. Didn't they figure that out?
Older, I know. As we get older, and Tim says, Mom, I'm never going to put you in a home. And I said, I want you to.
Wait a minute. I don't want to be under
you're
your
taking
care.
care of me? Wait a minute. Okay, all right. So, no, he's a great guy. He really is. But it just creates another whole layer.
And you're still a parent to your own children, and now a grandparent to their children.
And you never quit learning.
No. Then you have to assume the role as, you know, caregiver for your parent, and that becomes a very challenging time of life, especially maybe you're still working full time, and you know, we think it's difficult when you have infants, but like I said, you know, it struggles with a little bit of that other stuff.
And it's hard to watch your parent, in my case, my mother, ended up coming to live with us simply because it was easier. She was struggling with her health, and if she'd have a problem in the middle of the night, I'd have to drive 20 minutes to get to her.
Oh, right.
So it's like, so we ended up moving her close to us, but then when it was obvious as she aged, she really couldn't take care of herself all that well, and her health started to deteriorate. We ended up, after she was in the hospital, she needed to either go to a nursing home or come home with one of us.
Okay.
So Steve and I made arrangements, remodeled kind of one end of our house to accommodate her. We had to take doors off because wheelchair wouldn't fit through. And it was really a very stressful, eye-opening experience. And I wouldn't change it for anything.
Right.
My sisters didn't want me to bring her to our home because how would I feel if she passed away there? And I'm like, listen, I'm going to feel that way no matter where she is.
And your relationship with her was different.
Right.
You know, you didn't move away. So.
Right. And we were always close. In fact, she lived right in front of us when Tim was young and going to school, and he referred to her as the International Spy Department because she saw everything that went on. So it's kind of funny. Even our dogs.
He needed that.
Even our dogs listened to my mom. So yeah, it was fun. So yeah, it's been interesting, and you have a lot of challenges, and you have to learn how to climb over them and keep your own sanity at the same time.
This is back to the point of being yourself, and you know, you're just pulled in so many different directions, and you should be, and we're very capable. I think that is, you know, that contributes is, well, I can do it, so I'll do it. And then eventually it's like, well, I'm doing all of these things, but you know, how am I caring for myself, or how am I still developing myself? You know, I've got this whole life ahead of me still, and I want to be there and support and care for other people, but I will be able to do that better if I can continue to grow myself.
Right.
And
be in a position where you're not, I mean, it was so much easier to bring her into our home because that was one stress I didn't have to worry about anymore. After so many trips in the middle of the night, I'm like, this is ridiculous. She cannot be by herself. So, of course, she wouldn't she would only call me, and she got so used to me taking care of her. When we brought her home, I had a kind of a conference with my siblings, and I'm like, you guys are going to have to take weekends so Steve and I can get away.
For sure.
And have some time away from the house. So that worked out really well. You know, everybody only had to do once a month for a weekend. So worked out great.
There are, you know, everybody doesn't do this, but there are some things I always think that sort of guide, you know, my behaviors or my approaches to things. And I always think communication, relationships, and ownership. Those three things, if you don't do anything else, if you take care of those three things in your life, so you own the parts of things that are yours. You and I have an altercation. I can't fully blame you for that. You know, I need to ask myself, okay, what did I do? Or even if I feel like you really were 90%, if I assume 100% ownership of that, then I get to make decisions about how that could be different.
Right.
I get to be the person that makes that better, even if that is hard for me. So the ownership piece is so important. Relationships, if you can take care of your relationships, your life will be better. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
Or perfect.
Or maybe that's not even the goal. Maybe the goal is just to have the experience. And if you can take care of those relationships, build relationships, maintain relationships, all of those things will contribute to your life being better, not perfect. Right. And if you can communicate, even if you're bad at it, you know, you can try. And there are so many tools.
And that's one thing our family was bad at. I mean, people would have feelings about other siblings, and it's like, I always said, I, being the youngest, said, I can't control what you think. I can only control how I react to it.
Of course. This is
so
important.
You know, it's like you might spew hate, and I might hear it or be privy to it in the surroundings, but it doesn't mean... I firmly believe you can say anything you want to another person if you approach it the right way. Because as soon as you raise your voice because you're mad somebody did something a certain way, you've already lost.
Right. Well, and what is your aim?
Right.
You can say anything to another person, but if your aim is to control that person or change that person, or have any effect on that person that you truly don't have control over, it's not going to work. But you can say something to somebody, and you can say it in a way that is humble, kind, and in an effort to convey that it's in their best interest. You're likely to be heard. Doesn't mean they're going to change, doesn't mean they're going to like it, doesn't mean they're going to come across all of that.
Exactly.
But they might hear you.
I had a really good example of that was one of my sisters and my mom just butted heads. As long as I can ever remember, they just butted heads. And as Mom got older, she would say really hateful things about, you know, you come to town and you don't spend any time with me or whatever. And but my mom would sit and watch baseball games all day. She loved the Cubs.
Yes, I've learned.
So she would watch Cub, and don't come over when there's a Cub game on because she's not going to talk to you and she's going to be irritated. But she would say kind of hateful things to one of my sisters, and I said, she keeps saying that to you because you're allowing it.
Right. You're allowed to have boundaries.
Need to, yeah, exactly. I said, you just need to say to her in a nice tone, without raising your voice, that I don't appreciate that, and I don't think you're looking at it the same way that I am. Because I can't sit here all day and watch you watch TV. I mean, we always ask you to come with us. And we did. So she never said it. And so they continued to, and I'm like, I don't want to hear about it. Don't tell me because I've already tried to help you through it and you don't want to hear it. So you're just going to figure it out on your own.
You're going to be at odds.
Yep, you are.
And to some degree, you're choosing that.
Yep.
You know. So.
And I would say to Mom, like after they left, why are you hateful to her? I mean, you just don't talk very nice to her, and it just it just seems so weird to me because you don't treat me like that. So, but everybody has their own triggers.
For sure.
Certain things are going to just rile you up without any warning.
Yeah.
So.
And even you can feel those things, if somebody says something to you and you're triggered or offended or any of that, it doesn't mean you can't feel that way. But everything about what happens next is within your control.
That's right.
So how do you say something to me, I'm offended, I'm in control of what happens next. So I can perpetuate that and keep going back and forth with you. Or I can choose humility and ownership and
grace.
To take it in a different direction, and grace, and yes. Yep. And also to understand, you also are an individual person who is mostly struggling through life with hints of happiness, and maybe you're in a thing. And if I'm not, what if I could add to something that made you more joyful or made things easier for you in that moment, Also, that's a very difficult place to get to because we're humans, and human nature operates very differently at a primal level, and everybody doesn't think about that. But those are things, if your life is difficult and communication and relationships and ownership are a struggle, like those are things you can do in the immediate right now. Start practicing to.
And it's funny because I have a core group of girlfriends. And we travel together. Well, we started out going to Chicago shopping, and we did that for probably 10 years on a bus trip, an organized bus trip. It was nice. And then we're like, I'm over downtown Chicago. We've been doing it for so many years, it doesn't have that same thrill to it anymore. So we branched out. We started taking turns. But my whole point is your friendships are really what can help pull you through. Your family is your family. But you can vent, you can husband bash if you want to, you can do whatever you want. Within this group of ladies, that's been my strongest support. I know if I called any of the three of them right now and said, can you come over? It wouldn't even be a question. They would be there. And they have been there. So that it's just, my mom didn't have girlfriends. She had one girlfriend that I can remember, and it was a lady that lived near us. Her name was Ruth Kane. And they would go to happy hour, like at Jumer's, and they'd go where they had like hors d'oeuvres.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So they would go like on Fridays, Thursday or Friday night, and have a few drinks and eat hors d'oeuvres. That's the only friend I've ever known my mom to have, and she was probably in her 60s. And I think, I don't know what I'd do without my friends.
It's such a gift.
It is a gift, and it's something that we've been friends. Carrie and I, she's been the longest friend. I was 18 when I met her. So we've been through each other's lives and triumphs, tragedies, and everything in between. But this whole group, everybody's been married 40 plus years. And one of the girls just lost her husband this past year. But that's, it was a blessing. And he was 18 years older than her.
Oh, wow.
So, that happens. But I think my close friends have really, I think that's the best thing you can do for yourself. Because you've got to be able to.
Even if you have one, just one person. But if you have more than that and can have sort of this little community of, where you can be you and let your guard down and not worry about where that's going to go and feel encouraged and loved and all of that stuff. That is definitely
and we used to plan weekends. So we would each take a turn. And then we wanted more. So then it was a 3-day weekend. Now it's 2 weeks in Arizona. It's morphed as girls have retired. And one of them moved full-time to Arizona. So we're like, good, make sure you get a good, big enough house.
For sure. And you've earned that, after all of this that you've been through.
It's fun and life's rewarding, but you have to make it like that. It doesn't just drop out of the sky. You work and build it.
I even talk about manifesting, like I was talking about that. But, manifesting doesn't mean you just go like, it's not a wish granter. It's, I have an eye on something.
It's not a
this
genie in a bottle. No. They're not going to pop out and say, okay, new couch.
Oh, you wanted that? It's just identifying something that you need or want and then aligning everything to work, move toward that.
Right.
And, so to your point about having to make it that way, I mean, that's all attitude and effort and, strength and resilience and being able to dig in and understand other people. And, you're operating in a society of billions of people who you don't get to control. And so you have to figure out what you can do, being subjected to that and wanting the things that you want.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
And I just want to ask before we go, is there anything you want to offer to the viewers who I would guess are mostly moms, either in the throes of being a new mom or anywhere along that spectrum of motherhood?
Of the journey.
Yeah.
Because that's truly what it is.
It is.
I mean, I don't think I can add anything else. Just don't be so hard on yourself. Mm-hmm. You have to give yourself grace. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get it all right. Mm-hmm. And it's okay.
I think that's so true, and I think many of us have a hard time doing that because we don't want to do it wrong.
And that's like waiting so long to have kids for me was like, I was the kind of person who said, my kids will never talk back.
Oh, of course.
Or my kid will never do that. He'll never climb over there. Now I have a wild child.
Also, be careful.
Who climbs and hangs off the rafters and is like crazed.
Yes.
So you do have to be careful.
Yeah. You have to be clear in your manifest request.
Exactly.
You have to make sure that is clear. So, well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so happy you did this.
Thanks for asking.
Of course.
It was fun.
Yeah, and love being in the family. So.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Good. Yeah. So.
Well, we love having you.
Thanks, Debbie. So we'll wrap up with that. Remember to keep your perspective, but don't be afraid to step into somebody else's. Be resilient and continue to show up even when it's hard. You have to do that as a mother. And keep your pursuits going. Consider your own personal growth. And don't feel alone. You're in a group of about 2 billion people around the world. And we're here for you. Thank you.
The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals